The Nevada desert stretched endlessly beneath a burning sun. A vast expanse of sand, jagged rocks, and wind-swept dunes. The heat shimmered in waves above the ground, creating mirages that made distant hills seem to float. The air was dry, carrying the faint smell of metal from the scattered military equipment. It was here, in this harsh, unforgiving environment, that Captain Briggs had gathered his elite SEAL team for a long-range sniper training exercise. The team, hardened by years of combat and countless training missions, were used to extreme conditions, but even they could feel the tension. Captain Briggs, a tall man with a square jaw, graying hair, and a presence that commanded attention, stood before the group. His tone was both challenging and amused, the kind that could make men laugh or shiver, depending on the moment. "All right, gentlemen," he began, shading his eyes against the sun. "Who here thinks they can hit a target 2 miles away?" A ripple of laughter ran through the team. 2 miles. 1,240 yards beyond anything most mortals could even imagine aiming at. Many of the snipers were world-class marksmen, but this was more than skill. It was a test of patience, calculation, and nerve. The joke wasn't lost on them. 2 miles? Muttered Master Chief Torres under his breath. Even my bullet would need a compass and a map. Among the seasoned warriors, a lone figure stepped forward from the shadows of the mobile command tent. Ethan Cole. He was quiet, almost invisible, the kind of man who preferred the hum of a computer to the roar of gunfire. His brown hair was slightly tousled from the morning wind, and his eyes, calm and focused, surveyed the target through the haze of heat and distance. A civilian contractor, a tech genius, a nerd in the eyes of the SEALs, Ethan had been brought onto the project to assist with advanced targeting systems. He was never meant to be a frontline shooter. The soldiers noticed him step forward. Some chuckled. "Yeah, right," one of the snipers whispered, loud enough for Ethan to hear. "The computer guy's gonna show us how it's done?" The desert heat didn't just test the body. It tested patience. The seasoned SEALs had their rifles ready, but Ethan's approach was different, quiet, unassuming, deliberate. Captain Briggs squinted against the sun, a grin tugging at the corner of his lips. "You? Cole? Are you sure?" he asked, half in jest. Ethan nodded once, simply. No boasting, no bravado. Just silent confidence. "I'd like to try with my own rifle," he said. Briggs raised an eyebrow. "And you brought that thing here?" he asked, motioning toward the custom sniper rifle fitted with a prototype digital scope. "Yes, sir," Ethan replied, adjusting the strap on his shoulder. "It calculates environmental variables, wind, heat, elevation, even mirage effects. It's precise." The SEALs exchanged skeptical glances. The desert had humbled even the best shooters. They had trained in rain, snow, mud, and sandstorms, yet no one had hit a target at this distance. Most had failed repeatedly in simulations. But Ethan was calm, his mind already moving through calculations invisible to everyone else. He wasn't just thinking about the shot. He was visualizing the bullet's path, how the air would pull it, how gravity would bend it over the 2-mile stretch. Captain Briggs clapped his hands once. "All right then. Let's see what the tech guy can do," he said, half in amusement, half in curiosity. The challenge was officially set. The target, a 12-inch steel plate, gleaming faintly in. The morning light was set 2 miles away, isolated in the valley below. The ground between shooter and target rolled with small hills, rocks, and heat waves. It was a brutal environment, perfect for testing skills, equipment, and nerves. The snipers took their turns first. The first shot rang out, the crack echoing off the distant hills. The bullet struck the ground several feet short, kicking up a plume of sand. The soldiers adjusted their aim. Another shot. Clang. Missed. The wind shifted. The heat shimmered. Mirages danced across the distance. One by one, the elite marksmen failed to hit the target, frustration building with each attempt. Some cursed under their breath. The impossible was becoming painfully real. Meanwhile, Ethan prepared. He crouched behind a small dune, rifle rested lightly on a sandbag. His movements were precise, almost ritualistic. First, he measured the wind using his handheld sensor. Then, he adjusted the scope, inputting barometric pressure, temperature, and humidity. Each adjustment was minute, almost imperceptible, yet critical. He didn't rush. He didn't flinch. The desert roared around him, the wind, the distant. Echoes of missed shots, the heat rising from the sand, but Ethan's world narrowed to the target and his calculations. The SEALs watched, some amused, others skeptical. Torres muttered under his breath, "This is going to be embarrassing for him." But Ethan ignored the whispers, the doubts, the heat, and the pressure. Years of coding, months of testing prototypes, and countless simulations had prepared him for this moment. Every calculation, every small detail had been rehearsed in his mind. Today, theory would meet reality. Finally, Ethan adjusted his breathing. He exhaled slowly, letting the rhythm of the desert guide him. One eye on the digital scope, the other. On the target, he felt the distance shrink, not physically, but mentally. 2 miles didn't feel impossible anymore. It felt like a challenge waiting to be solved. He steadied his hand, felt the trigger beneath his finger, and waited for the perfect moment, a pause in the wind, a shift in temperature, a silence that enveloped the desert itself. Captain Briggs, noticing the quiet intensity, took a step closer to the observation point. "Remember, men," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "this isn't just about skill. It's about patience, judgment, and nerve. Watch carefully." The other snipers leaned forward, rifles momentarily forgotten. Even in their disbelief, they were curious. Could the tech guy really pull this off? Ethan aligned the crosshairs, ran through his calculations one last time, and squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked across the desert, a sound both sharp and distant. Everyone held their breath. Time seemed to stretch. The bullet arced gracefully, invisible except for the faint shimmer it caused in the heat haze. And then, ding! The steel. Plate rang, the perfect sound of success, the bullet hitting dead center. Shock rippled across the desert. The SEALs froze, jaws dropping. Captain Briggs' eyes widened, then slowly a grin spread across his face. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. Ethan lowered his rifle, expression calm, almost casual. "It wasn't me," he said softly. "It was the math." For the first time that morning, the desert seemed to exhale. Respect had been earned in silence, not with words. The impossible had been accomplished, and the quiet tech had rewritten the rules. Ethan Cole had never been like the SEALs he now worked alongside. He didn't thrive on adrenaline or risk. He thrived on precision. While the elite warriors spent their youth training in grueling conditions, leaping from planes and swimming in freezing waters, Ethan had spent his in quiet laboratories and university classrooms. His playground was the world of numbers, physics, and code. He had always been fascinated by the intersection of human skill and technology, the point at which intuition could be guided by computation to achieve near-impossible feats. As he packed up his rifle after the perfect 2-mile shot, Ethan could feel the eyes of the SEALs on him. Some were skeptical, some amused, some genuinely astonished. Master Chief Torres, who had never been one to be impressed easily, finally walked over, squinting at the custom rifle. "You really think you can teach us something with that thing?" he asked, a trace of curiosity beneath his doubt. Ethan didn't reply immediately. He simply nodded toward the rifle. "It's not about the rifle," he said. "It's about understanding what affects the shot and letting calculations guide you." Humans alone can't account for everything at 2 miles. But if you combine intuition with precise data, the impossible becomes predictable. Torres shook his head, still unconvinced, though a flicker of respect appeared in his eyes. "We'll see," he muttered. "You may be a tech guy, but out here, theory dies fast." Ethan had heard similar skepticism since the moment he arrived at the training base. His life had been one of quiet brilliance, unnoticed outside of academic circles and defense contractors. He had grown up in Virginia, a solitary child who found comfort in the logic of machines rather than the chaos of people. His parents had been proud but cautious, encouraging him in academics, while warning him that the real world often didn't value intellect alone. College had been his first taste of validation. While others flaunted physical prowess or social influence, Ethan excelled quietly, developing software that predicted ballistic trajectories with uncanny accuracy. Professors whispered that he had the mind of a genius, a rare combination of mathematical intuition and practical ingenuity. He had interned with defense contractors, eventually catching the attention of Navy researchers who were desperate to bridge human skill with advancing technology. When they recruited him for the SEAL project, Ethan had hesitated. He wasn't a soldier, never planned to be. But the challenge intrigued him. Here was an opportunity to test his designs in the harshest, most unforgiving conditions imaginable. And besides, he liked the idea of being underestimated. It gave him an edge. The soldiers didn't know him, didn't understand his capabilities, and that was exactly how he preferred it. Back at the desert range, the SEALs began to relax after the initial shock of the shot. Conversations buzzed in low tones, filled with disbelief. Did he really just do that? One whispered. Another muttered, "I've never seen anyone civilian or SEAL hit 2 miles." Ethan overheard, but he didn't engage. To him, words were distractions. The numbers never lied. Captain Briggs, however, was intrigued. He had seen countless elite snipers, men who could make seemingly impossible shots under extreme pressure. And yet, none of them had succeeded today. The quiet engineer, the outsider, had accomplished what seasoned warriors had failed to achieve. Briggs had a reputation for spotting talent quickly, and he knew a game-changer when he saw one. "Cole," he called, approaching the young man, "you've got our attention." That shot wasn't luck, it was execution. Ethan nodded, careful not to appear boastful. "Thank you, sir. It's a combination of calculations, understanding the environment, and the right equipment. Nothing more." The SEALs exchanged glances. They were trained to handle danger, chaos, and unpredictability, but this was something else entirely. They realized, slowly, that Ethan's skills weren't just an accessory. They were a potential multiplier for their own abilities. If his technology and knowledge could enhance their accuracy, it could change the way long-range operations were conducted. That evening, as the team set up camp, Ethan remained in his small tent, quietly checking his equipment and reviewing the day's data. He didn't sleep in silence because of nerves or discomfort. He slept to maintain focus. Every variable from the shot, the wind patterns, temperature fluctuations, mirage effects, was logged and analyzed. This was his world, one of precision and repetition. He didn't need glory. He needed perfection. But perfection had its costs. Ethan's mind was rarely at rest. Memories of failed simulations haunted him, the nights when bullets had veered just inches off target, when hours of preparation had been undone by a single miscalculation. Those failures had been painful, yet they had shaped him. Every error had been a lesson, every misstep a step closer to mastery. And now, in the desert, that mastery had been demonstrated before men who had never doubted the physical limits of the human body, yet had underestimated the power of intellect. By the next morning, word of Ethan's shot had spread through the base. Even those who had doubted him began to approach with curiosity rather than derision. The SEALs, warriors who had faced death countless times, began asking questions, not about the rifle, but about the calculations, the devices, and the methodology. Torres, who had approached Ethan with skepticism, now stood nearby, observing the tech engineer as he adjusted sensors and recalibrated the scope. "Maybe there's more to this than I thought," he admitted quietly. Ethan's life had been a series of solitary challenges, each conquered quietly and without fanfare. But in the desert, amidst men who lived by courage and instinct, he had found a new kind of validation. Not fame, not praise, but respect. Real, earned respect from people who had faced the harshest conditions imaginable. It was also a lesson for Ethan himself. He realized that skill alone wasn't enough to make a difference. One also needed opportunity, timing, and the courage to step into spaces where one was least expected. He had been underestimated all his life, but that had become his advantage. The SEAL's laughter, skepticism, and doubt had been a perfect backdrop against which he could demonstrate the power of preparation, intellect, and precision. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the desert, Ethan looked out toward the target, still visible in the distance. The steel plate gleamed faintly, a silent testament to what had just occurred. It was more than a shot. It was proof that boundaries could be pushed, that limitations were often a matter of perception rather than reality. Captain Briggs approached once again, this time with a more serious tone. "Cole," he said, "we're going to need you. There are tests coming up that will require more than just brains. You'll have to work with our team directly. Are you ready for that?" Ethan nodded, a faint smile breaking his usual stoic expression. "I'm ready, sir. But I'll need time to adjust the systems for field conditions. And I'll need your team's cooperation." Briggs chuckled. "You've got it. But don't think you'll get out of the desert heat. Out here, it tests everyone." For the first time, Ethan felt something he had rarely experienced: belonging. He had always existed on the margins, quietly brilliant but unnoticed. Now, he was part of something bigger. And yet, he knew that this was just the beginning. The desert had tested him once, but the real challenges, the missions, the coordination, the stakes, were still ahead. As darkness fell and the SEALs gathered around their campfires, sharing stories and laughter, Ethan sat slightly apart, observing. He didn't need to join in. He was part of the team, even without words. And in that quiet solitude, he reflected on a simple truth. Brilliance alone was fleeting, but when combined with courage, preparation, and the trust of others, it could achieve the extraordinary. Tomorrow, the tests would continue. The SEALs would push their limits, and Ethan would push his. But tonight, the desert belonged to him. The quiet outsider had proven his value not with aggression or bravado, but with calm precision, patience, and intellect. And that was a lesson the SEALs would not soon forget. The desert morning broke with a soft golden light, though the heat promised to rise quickly. The vast Nevada expanse stretched out in front of the SEAL team, dust and sand reflecting sunlight like millions of tiny sparks. Captain Briggs had called the men together once more, and a palpable tension hung in the air. Today's challenge was not just a test of courage, it was a confrontation with the limits of human skill. 2 miles. That was the distance to the target. A 12-inch steel plate, barely visible through the heat. Waves dancing over the desert floor. The SEAL snipers prepared their rifles, adjusting sights, calculating wind drift, checking breathing patterns, and mentally rehearsing their shots. Years of experience and countless missions had honed them into machines of precision, yet even they approached the target with a mixture of awe and doubt. Every step, every adjustment, was amplified by the sheer improbability of the feat. "Remember," Captain Briggs called out, his voice steady but carrying authority, "you've all faced extreme conditions before. But this is different. You're not just fighting the environment. You're fighting physics itself. 2 miles. One shot. Make it count. The soldiers took their positions, one by one, testing scopes, adjusting for mirage and wind, each shot a tense rehearsal. First Master Chief Torres, a veteran of countless combat operations, took aim. He exhaled slowly, tightened his grip, and squeezed the trigger. The bullet arced high above the desert, then fell several feet short of the steel plate. Clang, a disappointing sound, echoing in the valley, followed by murmurs of frustration. Another SEAL tried, calculating meticulously, yet his bullet veered too far to the left, missing the target completely. Dust erupted where it hit the sand. The impossible was real. Every shot proved the distance unmanageable for even the most seasoned snipers. Sweat dripped from brows. The wind shifted unpredictably. Heat waves blurred vision. Each failure reinforced what everyone secretly suspected. Hitting a target 2 miles away was, for all practical purposes, unattainable. Amid the frustration, Ethan Cole prepared quietly. Unlike the soldiers, he didn't measure by instinct or brute experience. He measured by science. With a handheld environmental sensor, he recorded wind speed, barometric pressure, humidity, and even subtle thermal changes across the desert floor. Every detail mattered. Every small variable could alter the bullet's trajectory over 2 miles. The SEALs watched him skeptically, unsure if this quiet civilian could perform what they could not. Ethan adjusted his custom rifle, a sleek and intimidating instrument outfitted with a prototype digital scope. Unlike conventional optics, this device analyzed environmental factors in real time, suggesting minute adjustments for elevation, wind, and trajectory. To an untrained eye, it looked complicated, almost absurd. But Ethan had spent months perfecting it, simulating impossible distances, and practicing shots with precision unmatched even in controlled ranges. He crouched behind a small dune, sandbag under his rifle for stability. He closed one eye, peering through the scope with focused intensity. The desert seemed to fade away. The wind, the heat, the chatter of soldiers, it all disappeared. Only the target mattered. He ran through the calculations one last time. Wind direction fluctuated slightly every few seconds. Mirage effects distorted the target at extreme distances. Even the curvature of the earth needed to be factored into the shot. Years of experience, but of a different kind, were about to be put to the ultimate test. Captain Briggs noticed the quiet intensity. "All right," he said to the assembled men. "Let's see if the tech guy has what it takes." There was laughter, nervous and incredulous, but Ethan didn't respond. He didn't need to. His confidence wasn't loud. It was precise. The SEALs took their positions, observing as Ethan aligned the crosshairs. He adjusted the elevation, accounting for gravity and the slight variations in terrain between him and the distant target. He adjusted for wind, which rippled unpredictably across the sand. He accounted for mirage effects, inputting data from his sensor into the scope, which displayed a corrected aim point. Every adjustment was small, almost imperceptible, yet crucial. He exhaled slowly, letting his body relax. His finger hovered lightly on the trigger. The desert seemed to hold its breath. Time stretched. Seconds felt like minutes. The silence was intense, the anticipation almost unbearable. Every soldier present felt the weight of the moment. This was more than a test of skill. It was a test of belief. Could human ingenuity, combined with technology, overcome one of the greatest challenges in marksmanship? Finally, Ethan squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked sharply, but the sound seemed distant, swallowed by the vast expanse of desert. The bullet began its arc, rising gracefully into the shimmering air. Every eye followed it, tracking the tiny, almost invisible projectile as it flew across 2 miles of scorching terrain. Dust swirled, wind shifted, and the mirage danced. Yet the bullet maintained its trajectory, guided by calculations and precision. Seconds felt like hours. The SEALs leaned forward, tension coiling tight in their chests. Torres whispered under his breath, "No way. It can't." But he continued watching, unable to look away. Then came the sound, a crisp, metallic ding. The bullet had struck the steel plate dead center. The desert seemed to vibrate with the echo, the sound of triumph resonating across the range. Shock and disbelief rippled through the SEALs. Mouths hung open. Captain Briggs' eyes widened in astonishment, then a slow grin spread across his face. "I'll be damned," he muttered, shaking his head. Every sniper present had failed repeatedly, yet the quiet tech engineer had succeeded on his very first attempt. Ethan lowered the rifle slowly, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. He didn't smile, didn't boast, didn't celebrate. "It wasn't me," he said quietly, almost as an afterthought. "It was the math." The soldiers stared at him, a mix of awe, disbelief, and reluctant admiration. The impossible had been achieved, and it had been done not with brute skill or instinct, but with quiet intelligence, preparation, and precise execution. The silence stretched for a moment before the SEALs erupted into murmurs and cautious applause. Even Torres, who had doubted Ethan from the beginning, approached with respect. You actually did it," he said, voice low and tinged with awe. Ethan nodded, still calm, almost indifferent. "I calculated everything. The wind, the temperature, the mirage. Nothing was left to chance," he replied. Captain Briggs approached, clapping once. "Cole, you just redefined what's possible," he said. "Not a single one of my best men could do that. And you hit it dead center. This changes everything." The words were not just praise. They were acknowledgement. For the first time, the quiet outsider had earned a place among the elite warriors, not as a subordinate, but as a peer, someone whose skills could augment and redefine their operations. The SEALs gathered around Ethan, asking questions, wanting to understand how he had done it. Some were still skeptical, but the respect in their eyes was undeniable. They realized that skill alone, no matter how honed, was sometimes insufficient without insight, planning, and innovation. Ethan had proven that intellect and preparation could rival instinct and experience, even in the harshest conditions imaginable. As the sun rose higher, casting the desert in blinding light, Ethan began to log his observations, recording every detail of the shot for future analysis. The SEALs watched him work, realizing that this quiet engineer could teach them lessons even they hadn't considered. Torres leaned closer. "All right, tech guy," he said with a wry smile. "Looks like you might actually belong here after all." Ethan didn't respond with words. He simply continued working, calm, methodical, and focused. The desert had been conquered, but the true journey was just beginning. The impossible shot had been made, but the consequences of that moment, the respect earned, the new possibilities for operations, the blending of intellect and human skill would unfold over the coming days. For the SEALs, it was a reminder that innovation could come from the most unexpected places. For Ethan, it was proof that preparation, patience, and quiet confidence could achieve what others deemed unattainable. As the team prepared to pack up for the day, a new energy had settled over the camp. The SEALs who had doubted him now watched Ethan with newfound curiosity, ready to learn. Captain Briggs, ever the leader and judge of potential, nodded approvingly. "Cole," he said, "get ready. We have more tests coming. And if you keep this up, you'll show us just how far the impossible can really go." Ethan simply nodded, looking out at the desert and the distant target that now bore the mark of perfection. 2 miles. 1 bullet. One quiet engineer had changed the game forever. The desert heat had climbed to an unforgiving intensity by midday, and the SEAL team had taken a short break. Yet Ethan Cole remained focused, crouched behind the sandbags, his rifle resting lightly in front of him. To the other soldiers, it appeared as though he was preparing for another shot, but in truth, he was recalculating, refining, and analyzing every factor that had led to his perfect 2-mile strike. Captain Briggs, intrigued and impressed, approached him cautiously. "Cole," he said, shading his eyes against the blazing sun, "walk me through it. I want to understand exactly how you did that. The men need to see that this isn't luck." Ethan straightened slightly, adjusting the scope, and began to explain. "It's not a single factor," he said, voice calm but deliberate. "It's a combination of elements: wind, temperature, air pressure, humidity, even minor mirage effects that most snipers don't account for. Over 2 miles, even the slightest error compounds exponentially. A half-degree miscalculation can mean missing by several feet." The SEALs, used to relying on instinct honed by experience, listened in silence. Torres, skeptical but curious, muttered, "You mean all that fancy math actually works in the field?" Ethan nodded. "It does. Humans alone aren't enough at extreme distances. But if you combine human intuition with precise data, calculations, and the right equipment, it becomes possible to hit targets others would deem unreachable." Ethan demonstrated on his device, showing real-time adjustments. A tiny shift in wind speed caused the projected impact point to move noticeably on the digital scope. Temperature gradients distorted the bullet's path. Even the desert's heat shimmer created optical illusions that could make the target appear slightly offset. He explained how his system accounted for every variable in milliseconds, adjusting the aim point accordingly. The soldiers were silent, absorbing the lesson. This was not just theory, it was practical, field-tested science that could save lives in combat. Briggs nodded slowly. This changes the way we'll approach long-range operations," he admitted. "We've relied on skill and instinct for decades, but what you're showing is something different." Ethan didn't take offense at the praise, nor did he inflate his own role. "A system only works if you trust it," he said. "It's a tool, not a replacement for experience. Even the best sniper still needs to make final judgments, account for unexpected changes, and execute the shot flawlessly. The math guides you, but human skill completes it." Torres leaned closer, examining the data streams on the scope. "So, you're basically giving us a cheat code for physics," he joked, though there was genuine awe in his tone. Ethan allowed himself a small smile. "It's not cheating," he replied. "It's preparation, observation, and precision. It's about understanding the environment and working with it instead of against it." The SEALs began to ask questions, their skepticism giving way to curiosity. How did he measure wind speed so precisely at 2 miles? How did he account for mirage effects that could shift constantly in the desert sun? How could a civilian, someone with no battlefield experience, predict conditions that even seasoned soldiers found unpredictable? Ethan answered each question calmly, demonstrating simulations and past trials. Every answer reinforced the realization. This was not luck. This was mastery. Captain Briggs observed quietly, impressed by Ethan's ability to translate complex science into practical application. He could see how the team's performance could improve dramatically if they adopted even part of Ethan's methods. He also saw the challenge. Introducing science into a team trained to rely on instinct and tradition required diplomacy. But Ethan was patient, calm, and methodical, the perfect teacher for a team of warriors. Ethan also demonstrated how minor adjustments could drastically change results. A shift of half an inch in elevation could make a difference of several feet at 2 miles. Temperature changes affected air density, altering the bullet's trajectory. Mirage effects, influenced by ground heat, could distort aim points. And the wind? Even subtle gusts that seemed insignificant could carry the bullet off target entirely. Each factor had to be measured, calculated, and compensated for. As the lesson continued, the SEALs began to experiment under Ethan's guidance. They observed how data-driven corrections improve accuracy and how technology could enhance, but not replace their instincts. They were learning a new kind of battlefield literacy, one that combined skill, intuition, and precision engineering. By afternoon, Ethan had earned their full attention and a measure of respect that words alone could not convey. The SEALs, who had doubted him hours earlier, now saw the quiet engineer not as an outsider, but as an essential ally. Even Torres, who had been the harshest skeptic, was taking notes and asking questions with genuine interest. "You've got a lot of patience for a civilian," he said wryly. Ethan shrugged. "Patience is part of precision," he replied. Briggs finally stepped back, observing the scene. He knew that what they had witnessed wasn't just a demonstration of technical skill. It was a lesson in humility and adaptability. In combat, the ability to adapt, learn, and combine human skill with innovation could mean the difference between success and failure, life and death. Ethan had shown them that even the most experienced warriors could learn something new. Ethan's mind, however, was already thinking ahead. The desert was just the beginning. If his system could be integrated with SEAL operations, it could extend their capabilities in combat, reconnaissance, and critical missions. It could allow them to hit targets at unprecedented distances with unprecedented accuracy. He imagined scenarios where lives could be saved because a shot could be made without error, where missions that seemed impossible could be completed successfully. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert, the team gathered around Ethan. They were no longer skeptical observers. They were students of his craft, eager to learn and apply what he had mastered. Briggs, ever the leader, gave a nod of approval. "Cole," he said, "you've not only proven your shot, you've shown the team how to think differently. That's rare, even for someone in my position. We'll need that kind of mind on upcoming operations." Ethan nodded quietly. He didn't seek accolades or attention. To him, the lesson was the point, the data was the point, and the perfection of execution was the point. Recognition was irrelevant. Mastery was everything. And yet, for the first time, he felt a sense of belonging among people who operated in a world so different from his own. The SEALs might move through chaos and danger instinctively, but in that moment, he realized that intellect and patience could stand shoulder to shoulder with courage and experience. As the camp settled for the evening, Ethan made one final sweep of his equipment, checking sensors, logging data, and reviewing calculations. The desert stretched endlessly beyond the range, but now it was filled with possibility rather than intimidation. Tomorrow would bring new tests, new challenges, and new opportunities to demonstrate the power of preparation and precision. The SEALs, meanwhile, gathered around the fire, discussing Ethan's methods in hushed tones. They debated the merits of his approach, shared their astonishment at the 2-mile shot, and speculated on how his technology could change the face of long-range operations. Torres, unusually reflective, admitted, "I thought I'd seen everything out here. Turns out, there's always someone out there who can surprise you." Ethan, sitting slightly apart, observed the team quietly. He didn't need to be at the center of attention. His satisfaction came from seeing his work understood, appreciated, and applied. The desert had tested his intellect, patience, and precision, and he had passed. But he knew the real test would come not from the desert, but from missions where life and death depended on a bullet traveling perfectly over impossible distances. As night fell and stars began to glitter above the desert horizon, Ethan allowed himself a brief smile. He was no longer just a civilian observer or the quiet tech in the corner. He was part of the team. And in this strange, hostile world of sand, heat, and extremes. He had proven that precision, science, and patience could rival courage, instinct, and experience. The impossible shot had been made. But the lessons behind it, the combination of intellect, preparation, and calm execution, were only beginning to unfold. And Ethan knew that tomorrow, the desert would challenge him again, demanding not just skill, but ingenuity, patience, and resilience. The desert morning was alive with anticipation. Heat shimmered across the sand, and the sun reflected harshly off every rock and dune. Captain Briggs had gathered the team at the edge of the range, all eyes on the distant steel plate that gleamed faintly in the early light. The previous day's lessons and failures still hung in the air mist shots, miscalculations, and the stark reality that 2 miles was a distance most considered impossible. The SEALs adjusted their rifles one last time, their experienced hands working with methodical precision. Each sniper had already attempted the shot multiple times, each attempt ending in frustration. Dust rose where bullets had struck the sand, tiny plumes marking failure. Whispers and low murmurs traveled among the team. Could anyone, even the best marksman, really conquer this distance? In the midst of the tension stood Ethan Cole, the quiet engineer, calm and composed. His rifle rested on the sandbag, perfectly aligned with his advanced digital scope. Unlike the soldiers, he did not rush, nor did he flinch under the intense scrutiny. Every environmental variable, the wind, temperature, humidity, and even the mirage effects, had been carefully measured and input into his scope. Each adjustment accounted for a seemingly infinite number of tiny forces that would alter the bullet's trajectory over the 2-mile stretch. Captain Briggs observed quietly, noting how the soldiers' skepticism had shifted to curiosity. Torres, still skeptical but intrigued, muttered, "Let's see if the tech guy can do it again." He adjusted his own scope, attempting to follow Ethan's method, though he knew instinct alone couldn't replace calculations that precise. The desert was silent except for the wind, a soft but persistent presence that carried the weight of possibility and tension. Ethan crouched, eyes fixed on the target. The rifle felt natural in his hands, an extension of his mind and calculation. He exhaled slowly, aligning his breath with the rhythm of the desert itself. Every movement was deliberate. Every second counted. He touched the trigger lightly, then paused. The wind shifted slightly. The temperature changed imperceptibly. Ethan recalculated in his mind, his digital scope instantly adjusting the aim point. He had spent months perfecting the technology, simulating thousands of shots, and now it all came down to a single moment. He knew that success would depend not just on preparation, but on execution. Then he fired. The shot cracked sharply, the sound echoing across the valley, but it felt almost distant, swallowed by the vast expanse. The bullet rose gracefully into the shimmering air, invisible except for the faint distortion it caused in the heat waves. Time seemed to slow as the SEALs held their collective breath. The bullet arced perfectly, its path determined by years of calculation, months of preparation, and split-second adjustments made in real time. The desert seemed to stretch endlessly beneath the projectile, amplifying every second of anticipation. Dust swirled in small eddies, the sun glinting off grains of sand as if marking the path of the bullet. The soldiers leaned forward, eyes fixed on the tiny steel plate, barely visible 2 miles away. Even Torres, seasoned and skeptical, couldn't hide the disbelief in his eyes. And then the sound came. Ding! A crisp, metallic resonance echoed across the desert. The steel plate had been struck dead center. Shock and awe rippled through the team. Mouths hung open. Some fell silent, unable to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Captain Briggs' eyes widened, then slowly a grin spread across his face. "I'll be damned," he muttered, shaking his head. Every sniper present had failed repeatedly, yet the quiet civilian engineer had succeeded flawlessly. Ethan lowered the rifle slowly, expression calm and controlled, as though he had done nothing remarkable. "It wasn't me," he said quietly. "It was the math." The words barely rose above the wind, yet they carried the weight of truth. The soldiers stared at him, processing the reality of what had just occurred. The impossible had been achieved, not with brute skill or instinct, but with patience, preparation, and precision guided by intellect. The SEALs erupted into murmurs and cautious applause. Even Torres, who had doubted Ethan from the start, approached him with a mixture of awe and respect. You actually did it," he said, voice low, almost reverent. Ethan nodded, maintaining his calm demeanor. "I calculated everything: the wind, temperature, mirage, elevation. Nothing was left to chance," he replied. Captain Briggs stepped forward, clapping once, the sound cutting through the desert stillness. "Cole, you've just redefined what's possible in this field. Not a single one of my best men could do that. And you hit it dead center. That's a game changer." His tone was measured, but the admiration in his eyes was unmistakable. The other SEALs crowded around Ethan, asking questions, some skeptical, some genuinely fascinated. How had he measured wind and air pressure at such a distance? How had he compensated for mirage effects and thermal fluctuations? How could a civilian, someone with no combat experience, predict conditions that even seasoned soldiers struggled to interpret? Ethan answered calmly, demonstrating the capabilities of his system, explaining how each small factor, sometimes imperceptible to the naked eye, had been accounted for. He showed them how a slight miscalculation in elevation could result in missing the target by several feet. How minute changes in wind speed could drastically alter a bullet's path over 2 miles. How heat waves could distort the visual image of the target, creating illusions that could mislead even the most experienced sniper. Every detail was accounted for, and the SEALs realized that what they had witnessed was not luck. It was methodical, calculated mastery. Captain Briggs nodded, impressed by the clarity and simplicity of Ethan's explanations. He understood immediately the potential impact. Lives could be saved, missions could succeed, and strategies could be redefined if this technology and methodology were applied in real operations. But more than that, Briggs recognized something rarer: the quiet confidence and unassuming nature of a man whose skill was undeniable, yet unpretentious. Ethan allowed the SEALs to experiment with his system under his guidance. They saw how minute adjustments made significant differences. They learned to trust data while relying on their instincts. And perhaps most importantly, they saw the value of patience, preparation, and mental discipline, qualities that could transform raw skill into reliable precision. By late morning, the desert was buzzing, not with heat, but with realization. The impossible shot had not only been achieved, but demonstrated how intellect, technology, and human skill could combine to push boundaries. The SEALs, once skeptical, now watched Ethan with a mixture of respect and curiosity. Briggs finally addressed the team. "What we've seen today isn't just a demonstration. It's a lesson. Human skill alone has limits. Technology alone has limits. But together we can redefine what's possible. And Cole, you've just led us into that new territory." Ethan didn't respond with words. His satisfaction came from the subtle shift in the team's perception, the recognition that his knowledge and preparation were valuable, respected, and necessary. He had been underestimated, dismissed, and overlooked, but now he stood as a peer among warriors who had seen and survived the most extreme situations imaginable. As the day wore on, the team continued to discuss and analyze the shot, while Ethan quietly recorded all environmental and ballistic data for future refinement. The desert, once an obstacle and a test of endurance, had become a proving ground, a place where intellect and innovation met courage and instinct. Even Torres, usually blunt and skeptical, approached Ethan privately. "I underestimated you," he admitted. "I thought this was a gimmick, but you just changed the way I see long-range operations." Ethan nodded, accepting the acknowledgement without vanity. "It's all about preparation," he said simply, "and knowing how to read your environment." By the time the sun began its descent, painting the desert in deep oranges and purples, the team was transformed. They had witnessed something extraordinary, something that would linger in their memories long after the desert heat faded. The steel plate, now marked by a perfectly centered bullet, stood as silent evidence of what had been achieved. For Ethan, the moment was quiet, almost meditative. He didn't need applause or accolades. The perfect shot, the recognition of his methodology, and the respect earned from the SEALs were reward enough. Yet he understood that this was only the beginning. The lessons learned, the trust built, and the potential unlocked would shape the missions to come, challenging him and the team in ways that extended far beyond the desert range. The impossible had been done. The impossible had been witnessed. And in the silence that followed the shot, one truth became clear: precision, patience, and intellect could accomplish feats that even the most experienced warriors thought unattainable. The desert evening brought a rare reprieve from the relentless sun. Shadows lengthened across dunes and rocks, painting the sand in streaks of amber and gold. The SEAL team gathered around a small fire near the edge of the range, the distant steel plate still visible in the fading light, a silent reminder of the morning's impossible shot. Laughter and murmurs filled the air, but beneath the casual banter was an unmistakable tension, a mixture of awe and curiosity about the quiet engineer who had stunned even the most seasoned snipers. Ethan Cole sat slightly apart, methodically logging the data from the day's session. He didn't seek attention. His satisfaction came from understanding, analyzing, and perfecting every detail. Yet the soldiers, particularly Captain Briggs and Master Chief Torres, were insistent on drawing him into conversation. Briggs, sensing the opportunity to strengthen team cohesion, gestured for Ethan to join the circle. "Cole," he said, "come on over. The men want to hear more about your process. It's time we all understand what just happened out there." Ethan rose, brushing off sand, and approached the fire. The SEAL's initial skepticism was now replaced with curiosity and respect. For hours, they had tried to understand the complex calculations and meticulous observations that had allowed him to hit a target 2 miles away. Now, in the firelight, he had a chance to explain it in person without screens, without sensors, just words and experience. Torres leaned back, his usual stoicism giving way to genuine intrigue. "All right, tech guy," he began with a half-smile. "How does it work? Walk us through it from the beginning." Ethan nodded, taking a seat and adjusting his scope nearby, as though it were an extension of his mind rather than a tool. "It starts with the environment," he said. "Wind, temperature, humidity, air pressure, all of it affects the bullet's trajectory. Over extreme distances, like 2 miles, even a minor error compounds into failure. So first, we measure everything as accurately as possible." He pulled out a small handheld sensor, demonstrating how it recorded variables in real time. "Next," he continued, "we calculate the bullet's path using a combination of physics equations and empirical data. The digital scope then displays the corrected aim point. The shooter still executes the shot, but every environmental factor has already been accounted for. It's not replacing skill, it's enhancing it." The SEALs exchanged glances. Many had thought they understood wind patterns and elevation adjustments, but Ethan's method introduced a level of precision they had never experienced. Even Briggs leaned in, impressed by the clarity and practicality of the explanation. "So it's like having a cheat sheet for physics," he said, half joking. Ethan smiled faintly. Not cheating, he replied. Preparation, observation, execution. It's about minimizing the unknowns. As the discussion continued, the soldiers began to see the broader implications. Missed shots in combat could mean mission failure or worse, loss of life. Ethan's methodology didn't just make impossible shots possible. It could transform how the SEALs approached long-range engagements. It was strategy as much as science, precision as much as courage. By the time darkness fully enveloped the desert, a subtle shift had occurred. The SEALs who had once dismissed Ethan as a civilian nerd now regarded him as an integral member of the team. Torres, ever blunt, finally admitted, "You've got patience, skill, and brains. I didn't think any civilian could earn our trust, but you're making it easy." Ethan didn't respond with pride. He simply nodded. Trust, he knew, was earned through consistent performance, reliability, and humility. Captain Briggs decided to cement this newfound respect with a practical exercise. "Tomorrow, we're moving to live-fire simulations," he announced. "Cole, you'll be working directly with the team. This isn't just theory. It's about applying your methods under pressure. Are you ready?" Ethan's calm demeanor didn't falter. "I'm ready, sir, but the team will need to trust the system fully. Half measures won't be enough at these distances." Briggs smiled. "Good. That's exactly what I want to see." That night, as the fire crackled, Ethan reflected quietly. For the first time in his life, he felt a sense of belonging among people who operated in a world so different from his own. These soldiers thrived on instinct, experience, and courage qualities he respected deeply. Yet he realized that intellect and preparation could stand alongside courage and experience, forming a combination even more formidable. He was no longer just an observer. He was a contributor, a partner in a shared mission. Meanwhile, the SEALs discussed the potential of Ethan's methods late into the night. Some debated the limits of technology in combat. Others speculated on how environmental data could be gathered under pressure. But the overarching sentiment was unanimous. Ethan had proven himself, and his insights could save lives, increase mission success, and expand the team's capabilities in ways they hadn't imagined. The next morning, the desert was alive with activity. The SEALs and Ethan moved through the exercises with renewed purpose. This time, Ethan was fully integrated into operations, guiding the team through advanced targeting exercises, teaching them how to interpret environmental data, and adjusting their approach in real time. The soldiers were challenged not only to shoot accurately, but to trust calculations that came from outside their usual instincts. It was a test of patience, humility, and adaptability. During one particularly challenging simulation, Torres observed Ethan's system in action. The wind had shifted unexpectedly, creating conditions that could easily cause a missed shot. Torres adjusted his aim according to instinct, but Ethan's calculations suggested a slightly different correction. Reluctantly, Torres followed the guidance. The bullet struck the target perfectly. He exhaled slowly, realizing the profound lesson. Trust in preparation and data could complement human skill, rather than undermine it. Captain Briggs watched closely, noting how the team's cohesion had evolved. The soldiers had moved from skepticism to curiosity, and now to genuine respect and collaboration. Ethan, once the quiet outsider, had become a vital component of the team's success. It wasn't just his technical skill. It was his calm demeanor, patience, and ability to teach that had earned their trust. As the day progressed, exercises grew more complex. Multiple targets, changing environmental conditions, and simulated enemy activity pushed the team to their limits. Yet with Ethan's guidance, success rates improved dramatically. Snipers, who had struggled in the previous days, began hitting targets consistently, learning not just from experience, but from the precise application of science. By sunset, the SEALs gathered once more around the fire. The atmosphere was different, now lighter, more confident, but tinged with anticipation for what was to come. Briggs addressed the team, his voice carrying authority and pride. What we've seen these past days isn't just about one shot. It's about innovation, adaptability, and trust. Cole has shown us that preparation and intellect are as vital as courage and experience. If we can integrate these lessons into missions, there's nothing we can't achieve. Ethan, sitting quietly among the soldiers, allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. He had been underestimated, dismissed, and overlooked, but through patience, precision, and consistent performance, he had earned their respect. The desert had been a proving ground, not just for skill, but for trust and collaboration. And now, he was part of something larger than himself, a team of elite warriors who recognized the value of intellect, preparation, and precision. As night fell over the desert, the stars reflected in the eyes of the SEALs and the quiet engineer alike. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests, and new missions. But for the first time, there was complete trust in their abilities and each other. The impossible had been achieved, and the team had grown stronger, not just in skill, but in unity, understanding, and respect. The steel plate in the distance, marked by the perfect bullet from days prior, now stood as a symbol of achievement. Proof that boundaries could be pushed when intellect met courage. And for Ethan, the quiet outsider, it was proof that trust, patience, and preparation could earn a place among the elite. The desert had transformed from a proving ground into a battlefield of anticipation. For weeks, the SEAL team had trained with Ethan Cole, learning to blend human skill with technological precision. Yet nothing could fully prepare them for the first real test, a live operation simulation involving multiple targets, shifting wind currents, and unpredictable terrain. The sun had barely crested the horizon when the team loaded into the Black Hawk helicopter, engines roaring, the desert stretching endlessly below them like a vast ocean of sand and rock. Captain Briggs gave the final briefing as the helicopter ascended. "This is the closest simulation to a real mission you've faced," he said, his tone grave. "We have multiple targets at extreme ranges. Environmental conditions will change, and mistakes will be costly. Cole, you're integrating the targeting system. Your calculations will guide our snipers, but execution is everything. Are you ready?" Ethan nodded, his calm demeanor unshaken. "Ready, sir. All sensors are calibrated, and environmental parameters have been mapped in real time. I'll provide constant updates." He checked his scope, confirming wind readings, air pressure, and mirage adjustments. Unlike the SEALs, he thrived in this environment not because of adrenaline, but because every variable could be measured, calculated, and controlled. The helicopter landed in a rugged canyon. Dust kicked up violently as rotors slowed, and the team disembarked with rifles and equipment. The terrain was unforgiving, jagged rocks, uneven ground, and unpredictable heat waves rising from the sun-baked desert floor. The targets, strategically placed at distances exceeding 2 miles, were barely visible through the shimmering air. Torres scanned the area, exhaling slowly. "This is going to test everything," he muttered. The team split into positions, with Ethan setting up his digital targeting system on a sandbag near the first sniper. The men had grown to respect him, not just for the 2-mile shot, but for his calm focus under pressure. His presence provided a strategic advantage that could tip the scales of any mission. Ethan began transmitting live data to the sniper scopes. Small adjustments appeared instantly. Elevation corrections, wind compensation, mirage offsets. He spoke in concise, controlled tones, guiding each sniper through the complex interplay of variables. "Torres, target 1. Adjust elevation by 1.7 mils. Compensate for 3.4 miles per hour crosswind from the west. Focus on mirage distortion, about 600 meters in front of the target. The veteran snipers worked methodically, trusting both their instincts and Ethan's precise calculations. Sweat ran down their faces under the harsh sun, hearts pounding from anticipation. The bullets streaked across the canyon, invisible against the heat shimmer, arcs traced only by the distortion in the air. One by one, targets fell with near-perfect accuracy. The combination of human skill and technological guidance proved flawless, each shot a testament to preparation, trust, and teamwork. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the canyon, more erratic than predicted. Dust and heat waves distorted the view, challenging both the sniper's perception and Ethan's calculations. Adjustment needed. Ethan called, quickly recalibrating the system. Elevation plus 0.3 mils, wind from the northwest at 2.1 miles per hour. Fire when ready. Torres exhaled sharply, steadied his rifle, and squeezed the trigger. The bullet struck the steel plate dead center. The echo reverberated through the canyon like a signal of triumph. Other targets followed, each shot a near-perfect execution, even as conditions shifted unpredictably. The team moved like a single organism, human skill guided by precise calculation, every element in harmony. Captain Briggs, observing from a nearby ridge, allowed himself a rare smile. "This is it," he muttered. "This is what we've been training for. Not just skill, but integration. Intelligence and precision working together." Ethan's eyes never left the scope. He was fully aware that a single miscalculation could disrupt the operation. But his training, preparation, and the trust built with the team allowed him to operate with confidence. He communicated calmly, correcting minute errors, guiding snipers through complex environmental interactions, and ensuring that every shot counted. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher, beating down on the team relentlessly. Yet fatigue did not compromise performance. Each soldier had internalized the lessons of previous days: patience, trust, and precision. They adapted quickly to Ethan's instructions, blending experience with calculated adjustments. Even Torres, initially skeptical, moved with fluid confidence, incorporating real-time data into instinctive decisions. By late afternoon, the exercise reached its climax. The final target, a steel plate at an extreme distance, partially obscured by a heat haze, required absolute precision. Ethan calculated the necessary adjustments: elevation, wind, air density, and mirage effects. He relayed the final parameters, his voice steady. Elevation 5.2 mils, wind 2.8 miles per hour from west-northwest, mirage offset 750 meters. This is the final shot. Execute clean. The sniper, Torres, exhaled slowly, heart racing. The canyon seemed to hold its breath. Every variable had been accounted for, yet the shot demanded perfect execution. Torres squeezed the trigger, the rifle cracking in a sharp report. The bullet arced high into the shimmering air, invisible against the heat waves. Time slowed, every second stretching into an eternity. Then came the sound that would echo in the minds of the team forever. Ding. The steel plate rang perfectly. Dead center, the shot executed flawlessly. A roar of triumphant cheers erupted among the SEALs. Even the usually stoic Torres allowed himself a grin. Captain Briggs approached Ethan, clapping him on the shoulder. "Cole, you've just proved that preparation, intellect, and skill can outperform instinct alone under the harshest conditions. This changes everything." The team gathered around, exhausted but exhilarated. Respect and trust had solidified into something tangible, almost palpable. Ethan, though calm as always, allowed himself a small smile. For weeks he had been the quiet outsider, observing, calculating, and perfecting. Now he was fully integrated into the team, not as a subordinate, but as an essential partner. As the sun set, casting the desert in deep shades of red and orange, the SEALs packed up their equipment. The day had tested them physically, mentally, and strategically. They had faced the crucible of extreme conditions, unpredictable variables, and high stakes, and emerged victorious. Not by instinct alone, but by combining human skill with Ethan's precise calculations. That evening, around the fire, the team shared stories, laughter, and reflection. Ethan explained finer details of his calculations, demonstrating the subtle ways in which small changes in environmental factors affected each shot. The soldiers listened intently, understanding that their success was no longer just about experience. It was about collaboration, trust, and the integration of intellect and preparation into their operations. Torres leaned back, exhaling slowly. "I never thought I'd say this," he admitted, "but having Cole here, it makes a difference. Not just in shooting, but in thinking. He's part of the team now." Ethan nodded quietly. "I'm here to help," he said simply. "Together, we can accomplish more than any of us could alone." Captain Briggs looked around the team, pride evident in his eyes. "Today proved it," he said. "We've entered a new era of precision and capability. And Cole, you've shown that intellect, preparation, and patience can stand shoulder to shoulder with courage and experience. That's a rare combination, and we're lucky to have it." As night fell, stars glittering above the desert horizon, the team settled in, reflecting on the day's lessons. The impossible shots had become reality, not through luck or bravado, but through preparation, trust, and the integration of human skill with innovation. Ethan, the quiet outsider, had become an indispensable part of the team, a partner, a teacher, and a peer. The crucible of the desert had forged something stronger than individual skill. It had forged a team capable of achieving the extraordinary, united by trust, respect, and the recognition that intellect and courage combined could overcome any challenge. The desert had grown quiet in the early morning light, the sun rising slowly over the jagged horizon, casting long shadows across the sand. The SEAL team gathered one last time at the range, their movements precise and deliberate. Today was not a training exercise. It was the culmination of weeks of preparation, innovation, and trust. The impossible 2-mile shot was no longer a challenge, but a symbol. A symbol of what could be achieved when courage, skill, and intellect were fused into a single force. Captain Briggs surveyed the team, his eyes lingering on Ethan Cole. "Today," he said, his voice firm but tinged with pride, "we test everything we've learned. The shots are longer, the conditions harsher, and the stakes higher. Every variable we've practiced for will be in play. Ethan, your calculations guide us. But remember, execution, discipline, and teamwork will carry the day." Ethan adjusted his scope, checking environmental sensors and cross-referencing calculations one last time. The desert shimmered in waves of heat, and gusts of wind shifted unpredictably through the dunes. The steel targets, set at extreme distances, appeared tiny in the shimmering air-mere specks against the vast landscape. Yet to Ethan, every detail mattered. Wind velocity, barometric pressure, humidity, mirage distortion, even subtle temperature gradients along the ground. He entered the data into his system, producing aim points with precision down to the millimeter. Torres, positioned on a nearby ridge, exhaled slowly. "Feels like the calm before a storm," he muttered. The team shared a quiet nod. They had been here before, but today was different. Today, the lessons of theory, observation, and preparation would be tested under extreme conditions that mirrored real-life missions. Every man, every calculation, every ounce of focus counted. The first sniper raised his rifle. Ethan relayed the adjusted aim point through a secure channel. "Elevation plus 2.1 mils, he instructed. "Wind 5 mph from west-northwest. Mirage offset 600 meters. Fire when ready. The soldier took a deep breath, aligned the crosshairs, and squeezed the trigger. The bullet arced across the desert with barely a visible trace in the heat waves. Dust erupted at the base of the target as the shot struck. A perfect hit. One by one, the SEALs fired. Each shot landed with uncanny precision, the synergy of human skill and scientific calculation evident in every impact. Adjustments were made in real time, and Ethan guided them calmly, every instruction measured and deliberate. The desert was alive with activity, the whine of rifles, the crack of gunfire, the shifting echo of bullets striking distant steel. Yet there was harmony in the chaos, a rhythm dictated by preparation and trust. Then came the final, most challenging target. A steel plate, partially obscured by a haze caused by a rising heat wave. It lay nearly 3 miles away, farther than anything the team had attempted before. The wind shifted unpredictably, creating subtle but dangerous variations in bullet trajectory. Torres adjusted instinctively, but the shot required more than instinct. It demanded perfect collaboration. Ethan's calculations accounted for every variable, and he relayed the final aim adjustments with precision. Elevation 5.6 mils, he instructed. Wind 3.2 miles per hour from northwest. Mirage offset 800 meters. Fire clean. Torres exhaled, aligning his rifle with unwavering focus. The canyon seemed to still around him, the desert holding its breath. He squeezed the trigger, the rifle cracking sharply, the bullet disappearing into the shimmering heat. Seconds stretched into eternity. The steel plate rang a clear, perfect ding echoing across the desert. The team erupted into cheers, laughter, and shouts of disbelief. The impossible had been achieved once more, and this time it was even more improbable. Captain Briggs approached Ethan, clapping him firmly on the shoulder. "Cole, you've not only proven the method works, you've shown that the impossible is just a challenge waiting to be solved." Ethan lowered his scope, a rare smile crossing his face. "It's not about me," he said quietly. "It's about preparation, trust, and execution. That's what makes this possible. The team did all the hard work my calculations only guided." His humility resonated with the soldiers, reinforcing the respect he had earned. As the sun climbed higher, the team began debriefing. Ethan explained subtle environmental interactions, demonstrating how minor adjustments made the difference between success and failure. The soldiers listened intently, now fully understanding the power of preparation in science, combined with their training. What had begun as skepticism had transformed into respect, collaboration, and recognition of a new level of capability. Captain Briggs addressed the team one last time. "Today proves more than accuracy," he said. "It proves what can happen when skill meets preparation and intellect. Each of you performed flawlessly, but we all know it wouldn't have been possible without Cole's guidance. Remember this: innovation, patience, and trust are as vital as courage and instinct in the field." Torres nodded, still processing the day's events. "I thought I'd seen it all," he admitted. "I thought there were limits to what could be done out here. But today we saw something different. Something better." He gestured toward Ethan. "This guy changed the way we think about operations. Precision and teamwork." As the team packed their gear, the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the desert. The range was silent once more, save for the distant echo of the morning's shots. Ethan walked alongside the soldiers, a part of the team now not just in title, but in action and respect. The desert, once a test, had become a crucible that forged unity, trust, and mastery. That night, gathered around a small fire under a canopy of stars, Ethan reflected on the journey. He had been the quiet outsider, underestimated by the very people he sought to assist. Yet through preparation, precision, and humility. He had proven that intellect could not only complement courage, but amplify it. The SEALs, once skeptical, now relied on him as an essential part of the team, a teacher, a guide, and a peer. Captain Briggs looked into the fire, observing his team with pride. "We've seen what's possible when limits are challenged," he said. "Today, we've not only tested the impossible, but redefined it. Remember this lesson: trust in your training, trust in each other, and trust in preparation. That's what makes a team unstoppable." Ethan, sitting quietly beside Torres, realized that his journey had accomplished more than precision shooting. He had built trust where there was skepticism, demonstrated the power of intellect in the field, and shown that collaboration could transform individual skill into extraordinary achievement. The impossible shot was no longer just a story. It was a standard, a benchmark, a new horizon of possibility. As the night deepened, the desert stretched endlessly around them, stars shimmering like distant promises of future challenges. The SEALs spoke quietly of operations to come, of missions where the lessons of the past days would be tested under real conditions. And Ethan, the quiet engineer who had once been an outsider, was no longer just a participant. He was a vital part of the legacy they were building together. The steel targets, distant, gleaming in the moonlight, were silent witnesses to the day's achievements. They represented the blending of courage, experience, and intellect. They represented the triumph of preparation over uncertainty, calculation over instinct alone. And most of all, they represented the beginning of a new chapter in which limits were challenged, impossible feats were achieved, and respect and trust formed the foundation of true teamwork. Ethan looked across the desert one last time before resting for the night. He knew that future challenges would be even greater, more unpredictable, and more dangerous. But he also knew that with preparation, precision, and collaboration, no distance was too far, no target unreachable, and no mission impossible. The lessons learned here would echo in every mission, every calculation, and every shot fired in the days to come. In the quiet of the desert night, under a canopy of infinite stars, the team rested, but the impact of their achievement would last forever. The impossible had been accomplished, and a new standard of excellence had been set. And at the heart of it, a quiet engineer had proven that intellect, patience, and precision could stand shoulder to shoulder with courage, experience, and instinct, and together they were unstoppable.